Hello and welcome. I'm Jeff Andrews with Business of Childcare. Glad to have everybody join in. Have you here today to talk about the ROI of localized childcare and really talking about some strategies and some opportunities and things that communities are doing to solve this infrastructure gap. And it's a big opportunity for us to think about childcare in the ways that we always do, right? Great outcomes for kids and families. But lifting that impact, understanding beyond just the child and family to what our communities benefit when we have appropriately aligned childcare. I encourage you throughout to use the Q&A box or the chat box I think you have the Q&A box to ask any questions. We want this to be an open-ended conversation, one that's helpful for everybody. As we kick off today, I want to start by a quick poll. Where is your community's biggest challenge around childcare right now? And understanding where people are at is helpful for me so we can make sure we fine tune our 45 minutes together today, starting to get some responses there. We really look at the reason many folks come to these calls and others is the blend of options that you see there, right? We're short of care for all age groups. We're seeing a lot of communities continue, unfortunately, to have a net loss of care year over year. Affordability is a big one, and certainly we're starting to more and more see the lack of childcare impacting the broader community, right? And the outcomes in our community. A quick share there of some initial votes. And that's what we're really here about today, right? Is how can we, as communities, as advocates of the field, as whatever role that we're wearing, hat that we have on the day, how is it that we can help make that change start to be a positive one? And so I hope you'll walk away today with some good takeaways and some good things to either confirm your strategies are on the right track, or maybe even take away a few things that help us better understand some opportunities. For those who haven't joined us before, unfamiliar, quick introduction. Business of Childcare. Our mission, very simply, is to help guide childcare business owners, providers, operators, nonprofits, and everybody else doing care in the communities they serve to better outcomes. And over the last 4+ years, we're very proud of our work, both with communities who have a new path forward that recognizes the benefit and importance of childcare for all of its reasons, but also ongoing, even in the moment, continued support for providers, operators who are dealing with the day-to-day challenges like any other business, but in many ways at a heightened level. And it's work that we do. I encourage you to visit our website and learn more about our overall services. Our basis is, as I talked about communities, as you're here today, it's wage realization, right? Beyond all the great things that we know, and we have good childcare happening for children, families, all of that, we know childcare historically, today, and probably in the future represents opportunities for adults to pursue their own craft, their job, their trade, while also being able to know that their child's in a safe and healthy place. And we know all of those things come together in those overall indicators for community well-being, right? Ways in which make our community the place to be and the place to stay. And we do that by bringing the whole community together. Right, we understand that we no longer can really recognize or see childcare as a separate family child issue. We know there are impacts for everybody. We highlighted the workforce opportunities, right? The help wanted signs are abundant in my travels across the country. So we know that as a beginning point. We know when we talk to education leaders, those elementary, kindergarten teachers, principals, and others, that they can recognize when a child's been in some form of childcare, right? And there's all sorts of cares. We're not focusing in on one particular, but they see the difference. And we know from a community perspective, when we think about school-age kids, if we don't have good childcare options for them, I've talked to police chiefs that can tell you they know where those kids are. They're not necessarily in the place for doing things that are as productive for those kids as they might end up being. So centering the universe, at least an exercise around childcare, put childcare community in the center and don't overlook, right? Engaging our existing providers and those who might be sitting on the sidelines to have even more real-time understanding of opportunities, challenges, and other things to consider. The whole community includes all of us, and just like every other benefit we find in our communities, this is a big winner for all sorts of reasons. And we'll talk more about that today. Our work as an organization and helping deliver that mission is really focused on three stages of readiness. And you may find yourself in most likely one of these three. We still have communities that are just building awareness, right? Building understanding of what is the impact beyond the anecdotes, beyond the basic understanding. And once we have some knowledge and some information to act upon, we see many communities looking for support and assistance in different levels to build a plan, right? As I often talk about in my current keynote, you have to have an address for success in order to figure out the best way to get there, right? Google Maps, we put an address in, gives us a bunch of choices. If we just turn it on, it'll just follow us where we're going. We'll have a great drive, but we won't necessarily get to that address. And so we work really hard to get communities focused on not solving the whole problem on day one, but what are your opportunities to take immediate action that have the best impact. And then, as we can imagine, we all come to this work from different journeys. Many communities, once they have a plan, then are looking for support on the best ways to implement that plan. What are the strategies happening, not just in Minnesota or Illinois or North Carolina, but around the country that we can apply for our work to make sure it aligns to and looks like the outcome that meets the needs of our community. So a lot of great work over a number of years now. And our most recent kind of highlight success story coming out of East Central Illinois, Moultrie County, Illinois, started work several years ago. And as of the end of this past year and moving through here, you can see great outcomes really going through that whole cycle, right? They started with understanding, they built a plan aligned to their needs, and over the last year and a half, these outcomes have resulted from having that intention and that focus. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing and that we get to partner with communities. And that's something that, as we think about the topic today, is really important, right? Because at the end of the day, you all have a bunch of other things that you're focused on and working on, and this requires a lot of attention and support. So if you're more confident, more confirmed on your path, you'll find better success. And when we think about this localization, when we think about infrastructure, I think we all realize more and more, at least we're seeing this with communities across the country, that infrastructure is infrastructure. We think about it first in the obvious, the roads that you drove to today to get to where you are. We think about the power turning on, or a new housing development requires those utilities. Many of our communities have those beautiful water towers. I love taking pictures of them, but they serve a fundamental and critical purpose of delivering water to our community. And then we think about the more recent kind of infrastructure element, broadband, and we look at then even those costs, they're significant and they provide service, they keep us hydrated and give a place to drive, but they ultimately aren't sending 10 people to work. And more towns are looking at, what if childcare was considered just like the roads, the water tower, and all the other things that we as a community benefit from as amenities. And so it's something for you to think about. What if we did look at it that way, right? When we need a fire truck, we figure out how to pay for a fire truck. We might raise money, but at the end of the day, we're going to make sure that fire truck's in the firehouse so that if there is a need for it, we're able to address it. And we need to start thinking about that as it relates to childcare. So we think about then, well, hey, Jeff, infrastructure is what it is. Why isn't it getting built? Right? And there's three kind of key things here that I think we've really learned a lot about in the last several years as we've worked on outcomes for communities. Is many small communities don't fit for a child care center. No matter how great a center it is, how great a director and team and everything else, I can give you a handful of centers that have closed in the last 2 years that we're working with currently to bring back online. It's a real challenge, and in many cases, they're making huge refinements and adjustments. And we also know, even in our community, sometimes our home-based family child care can be blocked by being a lease holder, right? Meaning you're leasing the property. Maybe the zoning. We have a lot of communities that don't allow small businesses, child cares, otherwise in neighborhoods. Those are other things, even housing gaps or ownership of housing can limit an individual who otherwise might be qualified and prepared from serving that need in the community. So we go from there, and then we think, well, if I could build a center, that's going to be $5 million. Right? If I did want to have a family childcare, where would they go? Because they don't own their own home, right? So we come now to a space limitation, and it's something that as you look in your own community, think about: are we creating any barriers or challenges to somebody otherwise who would want to do this in a way that would benefit our community? And even when we're ready, right? If we don't have a confident plan forward, makes it really hard to gather the resources, the dollars, and otherwise to make it happen. So we don't know that it's really, and I don't believe it is actually as much a funding gap. It's more of that we don't have a right solution to bring to the table. And so what happens, right? We have, when system can't deliver, we have a lot of people standing on the sideline, right? We have, at the end of the day, families who can't find childcare, and that's the age-old challenge, right? And I bet if I share a few of these things, you'll nod your heads. Is if care is not in town, what happens? Well, I've heard all the stories, but the more frequent and regular one is we've got parents and families driving half an hour the wrong way out of town, driving all the way back through town a half hour the other way because their job and their childcare are that far apart. So if we just think about cost to families, right? That's time. And time is money, whether you judge it that way or not. It's opportunity loss, right? If I spend 3 hours in the car driving back and forth, what did I not do or could have done or spent time on as a result? And we know the challenges even for employers, right? If my child care is way out of here and I'm over here, and now I'm almost sometimes even shortening my day. I'm having to make all these adjustments. And we realize life is life, right? And there is no perfect solution that will meet the 24-inch snowstorm. Centers are going to close. Why? Because just like you can't get to work, they can't. But when we look at broader solutions and opportunities, it becomes challenging to find that path forward. So one of the reasons that I like to highlight that we can't just keep building even small centers is they're really hard to focus on a success point. This is an example of a small, what we call a smaller center, basic two ratio set, two sets of four of infants, seven each of, so 14 toddlers, 20 preschoolers, and 15 school agers. Even with that license capacity, there are programs don't run 100% full 100% of the time, right? Because at the end of the day, we have kids that are moving on to kindergarten and there isn't maybe a preschooler. There's an infant coming, but there's 3 weeks gap between when the last one left and the replacement is coming. And we just know normal business operating helps us understand that no business ever runs at 100% of capacity. So when we start to look at those tight margins that you saw on the screen there, we start to realize there's not even a lot of room for error. And one of the driving forces that I like to highlight is the infant room math. And it's the least understood but most impactful reality of the child care sector, field, whatever you want to call it, is that this is a people business, right? We have people that we expect and hope are trained and qualified and passionate. But when we look at an infant room, generally you can have up to 8. We run a normal model of 7. Look at the math, right in front of you at $225 a week. That childcare business is in fact paying every week to have their infant clients come to their business. And I've not found another business that does that as a general rule. If you have one, please share it in the comments. I always like to pick up a nugget or here, but just by the staff, and this isn't staff making $30 an hour, this is at 18, which we know more and more is even becoming pressured when we can work at many of our service stations and other things for a higher rate of wage and a lower point of risk. And I don't lost on me that folks in the childcare field don't necessarily do this for the money, but I think that's also part of our challenge in thinking is that they're our neighbors too, right? They're living in our communities. They're providing a critical service, and many of them are barely scraping by. Just talked to a director who's also on food stamps, works 65 hours a week. That's where we have to, as communities, go, that's not the standard maybe that we want our center to be focused on. And so centers are not, the end game is, what do you want your child care providers to have as outcomes? It's a great place to start, right? And whether you know anything about it or not, just start with something. and then do some homework to see, does anybody even make that? Right? That can be a first step for us to think about. So when we get past the reality of the math problem, we get past the challenges of the field, and we start becoming more localized. I've more and more in our team encouraging communities to think about, what if we actually just localized our strategy one provider at a time? Now, for those of you that might be thinking, well, that's not super efficient. If we built a center, we'd get 60 slots. Yes, but an empty center a year from now isn't providing any more care than 6 family providers might have for the same capacity outcome, right? So you end up with this localization strategy, focusing on one at a time. Doesn't mean you can't do 10, but start with one. You got that provider thriving now. You've built a support structure around them. You've now created an opportunity in Minnesota to possibly be benefiting 10 families, right? Enabling 10 workers for local employers, which creates opportunity for our community, right? Our travels around rural America in particular is the somewhat same old kind of formula, right? If we don't have the amenities, if we don't have good schools, if we don't have this, that, and everything else, more and more communities are saying, and we need that childcare, because we're missing out on the employer, the possibility that's coming through town with their site selector amongst 3 others. I just talked to a national economic development leader who said more and more site selectors are being tasked with understanding what availability of childcare is, because I can't have a labor force if there isn't a place for their kids to go, that not only for them to go, right, but is a place that, again, we're proud to know our employees are bringing their children to, and a place that is ultimately meeting the needs of our overall community. And so today I want to talk about, when we start highlighting strategies, I'm going to highlight our newest and most exciting endeavor, the Childcare House. Our inaugural edition is going up in Mapleton, Minnesota. And I'm going to tell this story about Childcare House because it's really the product and the outcome of all of the challenges that we and our team and others, many contributors and partners, have seen overall as elements of loss, meaning this held it up, this held it up. If we would have done this, this would have been better. We've really worked to bring all of those things under one turnkey, shovel-ready package. But it's the story being told can be duplicated, replicated, and delivered even just with a family provider in their home. Maybe delivered in a hosted space, right? Maybe there's an existing, as we did in Northfield, Minnesota several years ago with Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, Three Rivers, created 2 spaces within the community center no longer being used, that today have 2 thriving family child care providers serving a licensed capacity of 24. Didn't need a $5 million building to bring childcare right closer to home in that neighborhood by just working with the realm of opportunity and doing it a little bit different. So the story is told for Childcare House, but understand all of these elements are the elements of success, that whether Childcare House hosted space or a provider in their own home benefits from, when we think about the long-term sustainability and opportunity for those providers to thrive, and as a result provide opportunities for kids, and again, you know the story by now, the rest of the community. So this is Mapleton, just to give you some perspective. Mapleton, Minnesota is about half an hour south of Mankato. If you're not familiar with Mankato, Mankato is about an hour or so south of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. On the right there, you see Mayor Annis with one of the local existing providers. One of the outcomes from our groundbreaking, which by the way has got the overall support of our existing providers, because the city of Mapleton did a lot of work localizing recognition, localizing outreach, and as a result, they're about 60 to 90 days away from having a new license capacity of 12 slots, fully supported all the way through. And so when we think about Childcare House, you can see the image here. It's an 800-foot residential structure. And so when we think about long-term community investment and opportunities like this, the benefit is that someday down the road, whenever that might be, if it's not needed for childcare, it can easily transition into a housing unit. And we think about a lot of generations moving up and down in housing. I heard from one community leader recently, said, well, maybe at some point that becomes a place for a local senior who wants to downsize their home. So it maintains a multi-purpose outcome, right? If you build a center, it's a center. And that's one of the key details as we put this together that we were mindful of. It also, Childcare House and any process, any outcome benefits from a team. And so we're proud to be leading this charge. We validate business case, we create a funding roadmap, we help with operator selection, but we have partners like Coldwell Banker Fisher Group leading the overall development process, the site selection, confirmation, all of those elements. And the big thing about Childcare House is no element is left unaccounted for. So even things such as the beginning set of equipment and materials, a limiting factor for many prospective providers trying to do it on their own is, I talked to a provider a month ago, she said, I would have started 2 years ago, but I didn't have the 2,500 I needed to set up and open my program the way that I wanted to represent in our community. So sometimes even the process can identify additional opportunities that don't require a significant investment, but simply are the helping hand that gets somebody set up the way that they want to get set up, and oftentimes our community recognizes and appreciates. So all of these pieces start to come together as one package. So as you're looking at your strategy, you're thinking about how is it we can add some additional supports that might not be the normal component, the normal way of doing it, that might change, right, our trajectory of outcome. I won't get heavy into all of the three phases, but I do like to highlight the comprehensiveness, the fullness of the opportunity through childcare houses. We help communities right at phase one confirm everything, right? We often have a site, I've seen a lot of sites lately that are being considered. We got to make sure it's going to work, right? We got to make sure utility, all of those pieces. So our team helps validate that. Our team of business at childcare helps validate the business case so the community can see it both from their investment point, but also the prospective provider. One of the challenges we sometimes see is that providers struggle with understanding the business case, right? And often they'll first tell you, I'm passionate about kids. Just as I said in a few interviews recently, several of the providers said, I'll learn anything I can, but I'm not as confident about the business side. I don't know what I should charge. And that's not an uncommon real, right? That's not an uncommon outcome where there's just an uncertainty, a lack of confidence, not a lack of ability, often a lack of confidence. So when you think about your opportunities, don't get over-engineered on this. Think about what could we do? Maybe our local chamber, maybe others can help contribute certain elements if we're going to try to do it on our own. How can we make sure that we're setting ourselves up from day one with success? With the Childcare House, another, I'd probably say the most popular element is that we actually help the community or entity we're working with develop the funding roadmap to account for as much as possible dollars that might be available to offset the costs of the investment. And so in the case of Mapleton, this activity, this function is secured over $230,000 of their overall investment before construction has even started. And the city and the community there has already accounted for the remaining dollars, but our team, our work, really helps set them up, and they're still actively outreaching for additional dollars, right? Having all those tools, the letter to send to your local funders, the help actually writing the grant applications in a professional way, and then tracking all of that activity, all part of the Childcare House investment. And one of the key elements from any project to have success, obviously, is finding that path forward on funding. As we move into the phase of ready to build and launch, this goes quickly. Every project is built on site, leveraging a mix of components and elements that have been curated to account for the energy efficient, really focused on childcare setting that is being created. And on the right there, you see a rendering of the standard equipment and materials package. It's also included and accounts for and aligned to quality programs in any individual state, but really set up specifically to help support that provider with the right setting from day one. Without waiting over a number of years to maybe get to their goal, they get a great chance to get started. And with Childcare House, for those that are owned by communities, the actual big equipment, you see the tables, the things, remain ownership of the Childcare House. The provider gets a startup package of materials, books, and things. But the benefit with Lakeshore is the lifetime warranty on all of that equipment and material. And we look at this as a 20-year asset. You don't want to, as a community, have to be replacing tables and chairs without necessity, right? And often that necessity is driven by appropriately so value-driven purchases that don't necessarily align with the long-term use case of the offering. So again, I'm sharing some of these things to highlight the work that we've done to really select the right vendors on your behalf ahead of time, so to speak, by incorporating them into this package. It also includes the full operator selection process, which in most cases is going to result in two applicants. Now you only have one childcare house. That second one often is an opportunity. We help communities think about how to get a 2-for-1. How can you make your best selection for the childcare house, but not lose the benefit of somebody else who's raised their hand, went through a process still standing? Maybe they are the one that just needs 2,500 to get started up in their home. So we work you through all of that. The provider works with a startup advisor all through this process, engaging with existing local resources, right? The goal here is to help that provider have their best level of success. So now you're applying this to your local setting wherever you are. It's the same idea. Some communities, some states have existing framework for that. Our philosophy is we're going to leverage all of those great opportunities and people and things they're doing by enhancing it with somebody who's just that tour guide, so to speak, for the provider. Because it's like any small business, a lot. And we find sometimes having an independent individual who's on your side and working you towards that same goal we all have of a good quality opportunity can help cut through some challenges that sometimes we found providers struggle with, and again can be one more barrier that might actually pull them off the journey to getting up and started. So just think about all the supports that you have today. Think about maybe additional supports you might consider. As part of Childcare House, we built it in intentionally throughout our process. And you might think to yourself, well, this is great. We're going to get to the grand opening. We're going to have a lot of fun. We know that in any small business, the first year of operation is actually the hardest. And so, and I'll come back to the layout here, we've included a first year of support as well. What we've found, my experience, our team's experience, and all the different places we've been, is that that's where the wheels sometimes fall off. Because as a natural expectation, lead up, the startup, all that's a lot of stuff, but it's really focused on getting started. And our intent, our purpose is let's make sure they're supported through that first year. So the package includes the investment in Childcare House, stability and coaching, all 12 months of that first year. They get several restock kits from Lakeshore Learning that are focused on some of those consumables that get consumed early on, but also focused on additional tools for the provider themselves. We offer as an option the actual property stewardship. We have a lot of small communities that don't have the people resources to make sure the lease payment, utilities and such are being accounted for. And so we have that ability to take that burden off. And I think the most important part amongst all of them in this stage is that we help you wrap up as a community at the end of that first year, all of the required reporting, as well as just an outcome snapshot. What did we accomplish in this last year that is better for our community and really helping equip community leaders as much as we do the providers with all of those elements that sometimes, again, become the burden of not starting because we don't have confidence, time, or resources to do it. I did want to sneak back here just so you could see a quick view of the blueprint. Continuing to refine this as we continue our travels, but a basic setup, all electric unit, plumbing and all elements there on one end, full open play and learning area, and then a traditional bedroom that certainly accounts for it being residential, but also creates a space as appropriate with licensing that an infant might be in. It may serve as another small learning area. The use case can be determined by the provider, but all of our units have been vetted with officials in licensing in different places, with local zoning and ordinance type places, and really focused on the efficiency and the outcomes of the space being intended to support childcare. A lot of excitement about that particular layout. And as we start to think it more realistically in our communities, and we have several different overlays here that start to see a traditional residential lot because of the size of these units, sometimes often offers opportunity for more than even one. I know Mayor Annis and Mapleton has talked quite a bit about the idea that this is just our first. right? We see more, and we see our ability to respond as needed to the needs of childcare by neighborhood even, right? And while we sometimes think of our smaller communities as a small town with a main street and a one stoplight, we know that if you're on one side of that town, even you can be limited on your options for childcare if there isn't childcare that's accessible and aligned with your particular needs. So lots of considerations, and this is process and work that we help communities work through even before they get to childcare houses, to start to maybe even for yourself do an inventory of what spaces might we have available that could serve a need. This is another example of a project we're working on, a larger parcel that will serve 6 units of childcare house. And you might ask yourself, well, Jeff, we could build a childcare center and get the same. And here's the benefit for you is you now have, and tell this short story, 6 units that can be aligned to specific needs in the community. This particular project is built right next to a brand new 99 unit housing space that's serving the local workforce, and they have second shift. Now, how many have second shift? Not many, right? Because it's a business model that not many people spend attention on to. But in this particular case, the 2 units closest to the street there actually are going to be designated for providers that will open at 1 and will close at 11. So they don't open at 7 to run second shift. They now shift their work hours to that second shift era. And while many of us might think that wouldn't be attractive, there are plenty of individuals in all trades of work that are working different shifts and different hours. And if you talk to many of them, they actually prefer second shift in some cases. So this gives options, though, where they're not now limited or trying to play the game of where can Bobby go today. They now have confidence, just like parents working a day job, to have that option. Another one of these units is going to be a partnership with the local school district to provide a smaller amount of care with subsidy to some children that would benefit from some more focused early ed, special ed opportunity. So all sorts of ways, but at the end of the day, it's also half the investment of a center that would otherwise accomplish the same capacity. So from a investment perspective, from a diversification of needs met perspective, for a whole lot of other reasons, this is why more and more communities are looking at ways in which they can localize their child care strategy without necessarily relying on people owning homes who want to open them and have willing family members to play along. And that's what we're seeing more and more as an emerging challenge. Encourage you to throw questions in there if you have any. Love to make this dynamic. I want to show also that for those of you who, hey, maybe this might be an interesting idea, but as we know, sometimes concepts are hard to always lay out. We do offer an opportunity, if you have an address or a land piece, to provide a visual rendering along with a localized ROI of whether it's Childcare House or any other smaller childcare. What does it mean for your community? Because that's where we're seeing success in those who are maybe the first face on some of these efforts, is we've overlooked what the bigger community benefit is in a way in which we can share that's meaningful, right? We hope, we expect with every new child care space opening that there's going to be quality and there's going to be good outcomes. And we know that happens often with good support, good relationships, but we often then stop there. And we don't think about back to that idea of if you had one provider serving 10 families, what does that really mean? And if you go to our Childcare House website, we have a breakdown of all of the ROIs from the community overall to parents, to providers, to local employers. But I'll make it easy for you. And we'll use easy math. If we think about an average income potential, wage potential of $40,000 a year, which, by the way, just a little less than the national per capita, and we multiply that times 10 adults achieving that job, it's a $400,000 wage swing. And again, we may say, since we're used to hearing millions and billions, wow, that doesn't seem like a lot. But remember, that's a value that's then multiplied at 1.4 when we account for that spending of those wages happening on Main Street. We account for those wages being accomplished investing in housing and all of the other things that our communities require as just daily ongoing investment. So we start to extrapolate that over 20 years, right? A space that's invested at all in just around under 300,000. It's about a $12 million return on investment when we account for the parents who don't drive that 3 hours extra each day. When we think about a provider who is now set up for success at a wage that represents the outcomes our community expects, our employers become, right? We can talk all day about the outcomes of it, but you see how we've moved from a $5 million center, which is hard to sell anywhere, to a $300,000 investment that has an exit ramp by becoming a residential unit downstream if and when we don't need it for childcare. And if you did the quick math there, you basically recap your whole investment because it's housing and it maintains as housing. Even a second bedroom can be added to this unit if that makes it easier for you. So there's some really good opportunities when you start to look at, in our own community, what if we could find a local family provider and we've thrown the $500 grant, startup grant out there. What if you brought it up to 2,000? Inflation, just count for that. Would you get a different outcome? Did we ever get feedback from our licensing frontline folks for those that didn't end up going through? Do we have a feedback loop that we create? And often licensing can't necessarily manage this, but can, again, through relationship, can we work together to get visibility on what is the reason 8 out of the 10 that came to the orientation didn't end up becoming licensed, right? These are low-hanging opportunities that you as communities can certainly explore even beyond Childcare House. I want to pause for a minute. There's a few types of questions here. There's a question on, filling and activating slots that are too small for a house, or struggle, for the conditions for neighbors to build ADUs, which, if you're not familiar, is I think accessory dwelling unit. And would they be too small to maybe accommodate all the various needs? What I say, and I think there's examples out there, you can go too small. And I'm gonna come back to this next question here. You can be too small for a space for a childcare. Minimum licensing standards, which sometimes people use as their back of the napkin in most states, is 35 square feet per child of usable space. I mean, you can't count the closets, and there's a formula and kind of a basis for that. So if you start to think about 10 kids, at a minimum, you need 350 square feet. And if you talk to any provider, they will tell you, I guarantee you, almost way too small of a space, right? Because you're really now at a 500-600 square foot space, accounting for all the other things. Our units are built at 800. We have a 1,200 square foot unit as well. That's coming online. Same basic idea, just a slightly bigger structure for a particular state that we're working with right now. The idea, though, is that the 800 square feet at 10 and at a more recommended 45 to 50, even 55, you're accounting for that space. And you're creating a space that's open. We think about visibility, we think about being able to use the whole space. All of those elements are thought about. So yes, you can go too small, and frankly, you can go too big, right? At some point, when you start to move beyond 800 to 1,000 square feet for 10 kids, you start to create opportunities where maybe there are too many cubbies, or there's a space that's blocked, or other elements. And when we think about some of our storefronts and other spaces that might be opportunities, we also have to be mindful of access to a park, playground space. In Minnesota, it's still 1,000 yards. I could be wrong, but so, I've had communities talk about, hey, we've got all these open storefronts on Main Street. Couldn't we make one of those? Well, maybe, right? Don't say no. But your first step is inventory all your options. Because at the end of the day, your goal is to obviously build capacity that's meaningful and is sustainable. And so all of those elements end up working into that formula. And again, we help communities, even when they have their own space, go through all of those support elements so that, again, you're focused on what you do. We help you guide through that. The other question that came up, a great question here, was about the idea of who owns the house itself. In the case of the Childcare House, the Mapleton EDA, the Economic Development Authority, has been our partner. The City Council has been on board. They've got participation from others, but the actual physical owner of that space and that land is going to be the Mapleton EDA. Now, a number of options we're discussing with communities. Certainly could be a nonprofit. And every entity has its own kind of statutory limitations. Like oftentimes school districts are limited in ways that they can formally participate just by statute of the state that says school districts can only do these things. So we help as part of that confirmation process really help the community or the partner think about who is and what is the best way for this to be managed, and knowing that it'll be different maybe with every community. It's our process that we've built over the last several years throughout this entire effort that really helps take out those questions and gives us confidence as we progress through that we didn't miss something because it's not our normal deal, or we didn't know. We've done that work for you and built that into this overall package. So I hope that helps. Anybody can be an owner. We actually have several individuals right now looking at acquiring a child care house unit as their own. And what an amazing opportunity, frankly. And I have examples of this being done over the years in several places where a woman bought, lives in her house, bought a second home, and now uses that strictly for her child care. This opportunity enhances that because now the provider, again, has a full guided tour to get started that enhances what's already being offered locally. So a lot of different ways to look at it. We even have a corporate partner looking at, instead of building a center, building a series of these in the neighborhoods where their employees work in the surrounding 50-mile radius. A lot of things, new concept, by the way. So it's not that we don't have a lot of exciting interest. It's so new. People are finally getting awareness, and that's why I'm glad you're here today to learn more about it as well. When I talked about the ROI, I want to not lose sight of that. Again, if you have more questions, I appreciate you taking time there. When we think about the ROI, when we think about beyond our own scope of maybe awareness and understanding and starting to share this opportunity beyond, we're realizing and helping equip communities, locally driven numbers, to start to lay out what is the potential. The project in Mapleton set a standard as a community. They wanted that provider at minimum, once up and running, realizing $25 an hour. Right, so that becomes also another opportunity. We have a lot of young professionals who've been in the CDA in the high school program or did their 2-year degree that say, I want to be a small business owner just like anybody else does. I don't want to build a $3 to $5 million center, but how can I make sure it's going to be a business that I can do my passion, do my things, but also pay my bills and live in my community. So this is just an example of our general ROI calculations. You'll find more information on our website. But this is where we start to see wins for everybody to also be participants, right? That's a big thing that you see in Mapleton, is not one entity, not one funder is making it work. It's really a combination of the whole community coming together to say this is important, and we see an opportunity to be a part of it. So a lot of tools, a lot of ways to help that make that work in a way that's positive for your communities. That's the end of the big presentation, as it were. I encourage, if anybody has more questions, and maybe beyond Childcare House. Maybe you're thinking about your own localized strategy. Maybe you're thinking about some of the steps that you've been taking. I encourage you, if you have any questions, to let me know, and we'll do our best to address those. I think the big takeaway is localization, localization, localization. I was at a recent speech, and we're talking about, in this particular state, the recent headline, $7 billion loss to the state due to childcare. And I said, everybody, that's a powerful number. We all know a billion is a lot of money, but I've never seen a billion. I don't know anybody who's seen a billion. As a matter of fact, I don't know many who've seen a million. But we all know what $400,000 means in our local communities. And that's why I think if you start back at beginning, build some momentum, get a win that isn't the $5 million sign up, you're going to find a lot better success with the next initiative, the next phase, the next opportunity. Because look, we didn't take 3 years to get something done. We made it, and we have the opportunity to deliver in 6 months. Right? And so that's your opportunity. Whether you're hosting a provider locally, you can do it faster. If you're able to incentivize better than the very nominal and meaningful, but not enough to get started, even home providers in town, you might see a huge opportunity. And it guides also on the idea of the 5% rule. 5% of our general population nationally is generally in that 0 to 5 bucket. So if you're in a town of 500, you don't need a 55 seat center unless you're off the interstate. You need a couple of family providers. And so it helps you get to a place where you can better consume the opportunity, and it's a better opportunity to pursue with the resources many of our communities have. I see no more questions. I know everyone has a lot of things to do. Again, we appreciate you joining us. If you're interested in seeing Childcare House on a lot in your community, if you want to learn more about Childcare House or broadly hosted spaces and the opportunities you might be able to pursue there, I encourage you to reach out either to myself, our team. You can go to our website, businessofchildcare.com. I also encourage you to find us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page, Business of Childcare, provides a lot of ongoing success stories, not only of us, but of others, and just general topic and content that, if nothing else, we hope will help build your confidence on being a contributing partner in childcare solutions in your community. Appreciate you joining us. Have a great day, and we look forward to talking to you soon.